Hey, everybody, this is Holly from Holly's Pandorium, and I have Martina here with me today. She is from Wandering Spirits of the Pacific Northwest, and she's also a podcaster and does research in the paranormal. Hello, Martina. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Hi, thank you for having me. My podcast partner, James, just talked to you a day or two ago, and he has been raving about how much fun he had. So I'm so excited to get to
Awesome.
meet you and have our little chat today.
That's great. Thank you. So I am very curious, since I have not heard your story before.
Mhm.
How old were you? Give me the setting. What happened when you first really had an experience with the paranormal that made you go, wow?
Well, I've been thinking about this just because I knew you were going to ask this question,
Right,
and
right.
it was a little hard to pick because I grew up in a family where I had a grandmother who was really intuitive, and she would have psychic dreams where her mother would come visit her, often before someone in the family passed away or just before there was a major event.
Oh,
So
wow.
while I didn't experience that myself as a child, I just kind of grew up in an environment where it was a given that this is the thing that happens.
Right.
And I've never been someone who has really referred to myself as psychic or medium or anything like that. I do
Okay.
think I have flashes of insight, and I've definitely had experiences, but yeah, just throughout my life, I had a very close connection to my mom. We often would know what each other was thinking and stuff like that.
Nice.
I think the first experience I ever had as far as seeing anything paranormal was when I was a little kid. I don't remember a ton about it because I was pretty young.
Right.
But my dad was in the military, and he used to travel a lot. And sometimes even when he was on leave, he would go and drive trucks with a friend of his.
Hmm.
And I was sitting watching TV one night and saw him walk in from the back of the house and around the corner and into the living room wearing the robe he always wore, his
Hmm.
slippers, and he just disappeared.
Oh,
So I don't think that's paranormal as much as probably maybe he was doing some kind of astral thing or maybe
okay.
fetch or something.
Right.
I was really young then, and it didn't make that huge of an impact on me other than it was just really weird.
Sure.
The first time I had an experience, though, where I really felt like I was interacting with something paranormal that I would definitely call paranormal was I had gone with my mom to the funeral of a friend's husband. And after we came home, and I only really realized this later, but
Okay.
after we came home, it seemed like something changed in the energy of our garage at home.
Oh.
And all of a sudden, when we had the washer and dryer out there and we had a big freezer, so it
Okay.
wasn't uncommon to go out and grab things. And
Right.
kind of around that same time, I started having the sensation anytime I went out there that there was somebody watching me. And in
Mm.
particular, like up in the rafters in
Oh,
the
my.
near the ceiling. And it was a really unpleasant feeling to the point where if I had to do laundry, I would go out, I would dump it in really fast, close it, run back in the house.
Oh, wow.
And then I realized that the dog was kind of afraid to go in there too. He'd come to the door if you had it open and stand and watch, but he would not go down the stairs or set foot in the
Oh.
garage. And I just, for the longest time, had this just horrible feeling anytime. I didn't know what it was, but it just felt malevolent and scary. And I hadn't said anything because I thought my family was going to think I was crazy if I told them
Of course. Of
that I'm
course.
scared of the
Right.
garage.
Right.
And one day, my mom and I don't even know how it came up anymore, but we started kind of talking about it. And I came to realize she was having the same experiences as I was. And
Oh,
I was probably like late teens, early college
okay.
age, something like that.
Okay.
Um, and neither one of us had said anything because we thought the other one was going to make fun of it.
Oh, oh, I love that.
And so one day my parents were gone and I was in the house by myself and I went out to get something and I felt it again. And I just thought, you know what? I've had enough of this.
Right.
And so I went in the house and I got a candle and I got some sage to
Okay.
burn. And I went around the garage and I did my saging and I just said to whatever it was, look, I don't know who you are. I don't know why you're here, but this has got to stop. You're scaring my family and we don't
Right.
like it. You need to, at the very least, stop it, or at the very best, go away.
Right. Right.
And it turned out that whatever it was gone after that. And that was really kind of, even though I had this awareness of metaphysical things when I was younger because of my grandmother being an intuitive, and
Right.
just it was something that interested my mom. So it was something we'd read about, or we'd go to psychic
Right.
fairs or places where
Oh,
we could
cool.
learn things, which was so great.
Yes.
That was my first, and I had, like, my grandfather had not out of body, he had a near death experience that was really interesting, that involved my grandmother having
Oh,
this
wow.
intuitive message. But that was really the first time for me, for myself, that I realized that I could communicate with these energies from across the liminal, and that it
Right.
wasn't just that you had to be there and accept it or be scared of it or anything else, but that it was something you could interact with.
Right. Right. So,
And
yeah, I'm just curious. So, let's go back a minute. I mean,
yeah,
interrupt you for a second. So, you kind of answered a little bit. So the garage thing, it
mhm,
sounds like you were in your teenage-ish years.
yeah.
Now, was that funeral that you went to with your mom, was that like your first real funeral you had gone to that you can remember?
I had been to a funeral when my grandparents died when I was really young, but this
Okay.
was the first one I had ever been to that had an open casket and was
Okay.
just different from, and I'm not saying that there's anything related to their religion that caused this, but
No,
I'm
I
just saying
gotcha.
it's
I
different
gotcha.
because it just wasn't what I grew up with. They were a Mormon family that my mom was friends with. So some of their traditions were a little different,
Sure. Sure, sure.
just between that. And then my mom was an American. So we had different traditions as well, just because of
Right.
that.
Right.
Um, so I don't know. I know it was a different kind of experience for me going to the event.
Right.
Um, and I'm not even 100% sure that it was related to the funeral. I just know it started around that time, which makes me suspect maybe.
Right. So my suspicion is that a couple things went on. If
Mhm,
I'm understanding what you're explaining to me correctly, it sounds to me like um, you're clearly a light worker, and that's a huge attraction. And whenever there's any death experience,
mhm,
there's energies all over the place. Um, Anything that's a lower energy, anything that involves sadness or
mhm.
anger or frustration or anything to do with letting go of a loved one, all of that's a very low energy, and so
Yeah,
it attracts lesser things. It attracts
sure.
things at that vibration. I shouldn't say lesser. It attracts things at a lower level.
Mhm,
It attracts things that are in need of more energy desperately, and so when they see anyone that has any light going on in them, it's an attraction. So they probably followed you and your mom home. They probably
probably.
saw you and your mom and went, "Ooh, Scooby snack." And just followed you guys thinking, "We can get energy from these 2. Woohoo, score. There's
Yeah.
2 of them." So it's not a surprise to me at all that it hung around in the garage and in a corner somewhere or
Mhm.
whatever, and just was trying to scare you a little bit just to
Yeah.
get that energy back from wherever they lost it, and
Mhm,
what you did to get rid of it was very appropriate and safe.
mhm.
Um, I love it when people just say, "You just need to go." There's no need to interview something that's making you uncomfortable. It's actually
Right?
not a good idea to do that.
I
So
agree.
just telling it this is my space. You're not allowed here. If you're going to be naughty, you got to
Mhm.
go. So
Yeah.
touche. As a kid, you had very good
Yay.
instincts. So that was a perfect way to handle that situation.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of us wind up having something like that where they just feel creeped out, or
Mhm.
the hair goes up on the back of your neck,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
our inkling is, as we get older, is to not say anything. And I love that kids do. They just say
Mhm.
something's weird, or
Yeah.
I don't like that, or something. I love it when kids speak up and say things like that, because you never know.
Yeah.
You just never know. So continue with your story. So you had this funeral experience other
Yeah.
than seeing your dad, and then what happened?
Um, so I think for me, that was kind of a turning point in the paranormal, and not just paranormal, but mystical is something I've always been kind of drawn to and interested by, and not in the way of, I think a lot of younger people are interested into it because they like being scared.
Right.
And it's fun and it's entertaining to get that little jolt of endorphins, and
Right.
not in that way, but really in a really in the way of curiosity about what is it that
Right.
exists after this, what is the nature, spirit, and the soul, and all of those things. And for
Right.
me, even though I'd had that interest before, that experience was kind of a turning point that made me feel like, yeah, this stuff, it's real, and
Yeah.
you can communicate. It's not, and I'd had, like I said, I had stories from childhood where, oh, after my great aunt passed, my grandmother would feel her in the apartment they lived in. And sometimes even there was a suitcase full of stuff after she had died that she had on top of this really big, tall armoire.
Uh-huh.
And they had been looking for some paperwork that nobody could find. And my grandmother kept having the experience when she was going to open the window next to the armoire, that
Mhm.
she'd feel like there was something like really palpable standing between her and the window.
Oh.
And eventually kind of figured out that it was her sister.
Oh.
And after she one day went to go, for whatever reason, she went to go look in the suitcase, realized that it was her sister blocking the way because she wanted her to go to the suitcase, because the
Oh,
papers they were
funny.
looking for were all in this suitcase of totally unrelated stuff. But
Right? But
right.
that's great. See,
Yeah.
I love that. Spirits have a sense of humor, and I think
Mhm.
that they try to tell us stuff more than you imagine. I've heard from different energies that, and this is very hilarious. I love sharing this. So spirits actually brag when
Mm.
they connect with humans that are family, especially when they communicate with each other. That is a source of great joy and pride that they got through to someone, because many of them, especially our spirit guides,
Mhm.
try exhaustively, sometimes for many years, to get our attention and
Yeah.
just say anything, or share something, or warn, or direct, or just little, because they're not allowed to tell us everything, but they're allowed to share little hints and whatever's along the way.
Mhm.
And so when there's a connection and somebody notices, that's like a party in the afterlife. They're so excited that we heard them and understood. They love it.
Yeah.
So that's really fun. I love that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, it is. I, I mean, there's so many different types of energy as well. And as you start to explore these things more too, you start feeling the difference between different types of guides and helpers and
Right.
ancestors and all of that. And it's such that liminal space, especially between here and whatever lies beyond, just
Right.
fascinates me.
It's awesome. It's
Yeah,
there's a lot to experience, and it's a fun journey.
it
So
is.
so after having these experiences, can you share with everybody listening and viewing,
Mhm.
how did it affect you? I mean, you clearly were curious, so it was something you were interested in, but what did it do to you? How did you respond?
I think for me, it really deepened my desire to learn about and to take it from just something I was kind of sort of interested in to
Right.
wanting to really learn about and to start developing my own intuition a bit. And that was kind of the beginning for me of exploring, earth-based spiritual paths and wanting to connect with my, the ancestors, not just my
Sure.
ancestors alone, but the
Right.
ancestors in
Right.
general,
Sure.
and have a connection with, spirit, and to really believe this idea that if whatever this entity was that kind of confronted me can be there, then that also opens up the door to the idea that, my grandparents, who I lost when I was young, can communicate with me.
Right.
And I've had lots of experiences that have kind of affirmed that over the years. That there's just the notion that we're more than the bodies we're walking around in. When I
Exactly.
was in my mid-20s, my dad passed away, but I was
Oh, I'm
living out of state.
sorry.
Oh, thank you. It's been a long time now, but I had this experience. I was living in California and was in the middle of moving from living in a roommate situation to having kind of my first real by myself apartment with a real
Oh,
job.
wow.
And
That's
all
a big move. That's a big move.
it was. And my father had had a massive stroke a year
Mhm.
and a half before or so. So he had already been kind of in poor health. But I was moving into this new apartment, and I remember standing there and I was unpacking things, and all of a sudden I heard this voice in my head. And it wasn't like the kind of voice you hear when you're just thinking about things or anxious. Sometimes you're going to do something and you kind of think, oh, is this going to work out? I don't know. I'm
Right.
kind of worried. But I heard this really clear voice in my head that said to me, don't worry so much about unpacking. You're never going to live here. You're not really ever going to live here. And my bed hadn't been moved yet. So I went back to my old place, went to bed. And in the middle of the night, there was a call from my mom saying my dad had had a heart attack
Oh,
and that she wanted me to come home because they didn't think he would survive. So I immediately flew home. And when we were at the hospital, it was me, my mom, and one of my cousins. And I just remember being really, really concerned that I did not want my father to die alone. And so I
right.
was really afraid to go to sleep.
Oh.
Somehow we lucked out and got a double room that was just him in it. So there was a cot in it.
Oh,
And
nice.
I remember my mom and my cousin telling me, you need to go to just take a nap, go to sleep for a little bit. We'll wake you up if anything changes. And I didn't want to, but they
Right.
eventually bullied me into laying down.
Right, right. Well, you probably look like you needed it, so they were trying
Yeah.
to be
Oh, I'm
good to you.
sure. I'm
Right.
sure I did. I left on a flight at like 4 a.m.
Oh,
and
wow.
um, but so I was trying not to go to sleep, and I could kind of, they had taken him off of life support, and the rattle that the breath
Oh,
makes
yeah.
when someone's
Yeah.
dying was already kind of starting to happen. And I remember fighting going to sleep, and I'd kind of fall asleep for a second or two, and then I'd wake up and
Mhm.
then I doze off a little. And the last time I woke up, it felt like someone shook me awake. And
Mhm.
again, I heard the same voice in my head that was, you need to get up and go sit by him now. And I got up and went over and sat by him and held his hand. And it was one of those moments that felt like it took an eternity
Yeah.
and probably was just a minute or two, if that.
Sure.
But I remember sitting down next to him and looking at him and his face looking almost like, kind of like when you watch a movie and something morphs or melts kind of from one
Okay.
being into another,
Okay.
but not in a scary sounding way like that might have been. It was just like every like ounce of pain and worry and even the lines on his face just kind of melted, and he looked so peaceful. And he
Nice.
passed away within, probably, like I said, at the very most a minute or two, but I think probably way less just because of the way
That's
time.
amazing. I love, Martina, how you are describing this. So
Yeah.
I've done some home care work with
Mhm.
family and clients, and
Yeah.
so I've been with several people when they've passed, and what you're describing, I think people miss sometimes in their grief. They don't
Yeah.
always observe what's happening, and
Mhm.
this is one of my great fascinations. Back in the 1800s is when some
Mhm.
photographs were first becoming really popular, and
Yes.
there was some scientific studies in the early 1900s about
Mhm.
what happens when people die. The spiritual movement was very big
Yeah.
after, the Civil War and World
Right.
War One, and so many people had been studying for years, what does the body do when people die?
Yeah.
And so there's these really cool images, and I know some people may think this sounds completely morbid, but follow me here for just a second.
Mhm.
People were observed as they were dying in photographs. Many photographs were taken
Mhm.
to see what happened to the body.
Mhm.
One of them, which I've discussed before, they have beds that weigh you, that
Mhm.
can sense
Yeah.
your weight, and
To
there's
see where it
been
goes down. Yeah.
it's 12 ounces, 12 to 14 ounces of change. So, ergo, the soul or spirit
Mhm.
of a person, their personality, when it leaves, there goes that ounce count, and
Mhm.
there's this mist that comes out of the body.
Yeah.
But what Martina's describing is the actual physical metamorphosis. When
Mhm.
someone is able to let go, there is no pain.
Yeah.
There's nothing morbid about it. It's lovely. It's this
Mhm.
incredible, there's no more stress, there's no more
Yeah.
worry. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's incredible to get to see it because a lot of us never do.
Mhm.
Um, but it's when you're in your own grief, so that's amazing to me that you had the forethought and the wherewithal to notice, because
Yeah.
that's beautiful. You got to see him at peace. That's
Absolutely.
wonderful.
Yeah,
That
no,
to
it
me is
was
a huge blessing to get to see that. Um, I know people have a lot of mixed feelings about being around someone who's dying, or, the
mhm.
person leaving says, "I don't want you to remember me like this," but that's not why you're there. You know, you're
Mhm.
you're there because you just wanna know they're not by themselves, and you wanna make
Exactly.
sure that you're supporting and loving them no matter what happens.
Mhm.
So, I think
Well,
that's amazing.
and I think that's one of the reasons why studying this paranormal stuff is so important, because we culturally have such a hard time talking about death. And we're
Yes.
so much in our modern world further away from it than past generations.
Yes.
In the
100% agree. Yes.
Yeah, like in the 19th century, like you were talking about, when there was this whole surge of the spiritualist movement and people becoming interested in these things,
Right.
largely because of the Civil War in this
Right.
country as well, too. So many people had lost people. It was normal that you would go through your life and have a loved one die at home.
Tons. Well,
Yeah.
and just the whole ceremony of it, and it didn't matter what your
Mhm.
religious proclivity was. You
Yes.
had a period of time to grieve. The thing about it that's fascinating to me is that I think we missed out. We
Mhm.
didn't ha there's not that exposure anymore. Death is so common on television, it doesn't seem real, and yet it is real, and we forget that we're
Mhm.
going to die. We get so busy living, we forget that there's a stopping point at some venture in our lives where everything stops. And
Yeah,
so
and I think because we don't get exposed to it in a close way as much. Yeah, it's all over
right,
the place on TV, but we feel uncomfortable with it.
right.
People don't. I had the experience of caring for my mom. She had dementia, and I was her caregiver
Oh,
for
yeah,
8 years.
wow.
And you go through all these little losses,
Right.
these little deaths over and over again as you lose
Mhm.
parts of a person.
I love that there's things coming up, and, like, part of ghost hunting that I love is now we have these devices that hear what I hear.
Hmm.
I hear spirits talking, and so for the first time in my life, I can sense a ghost, see a ghost, hear a ghost, and so can everybody else. There's
Mhm.
other ways for people to track stuff, and it's very
Yeah.
edifying to me. It's like, I am not crazy. I am not I
Right.
see and I hear real stuff. It's really happening in front of me, and I can track it, and people can
Yeah.
monitor it. It's like, yes, it's just super exciting. We had an
Yeah.
experience. James and I went on his group went on our first, I guess, I don't know, our first time as a group to go together to a
Uh-huh.
place in Astoria, and I was able one of the girls had a ghost camera and showed it to me. I could see the ghost. She could see the ghost on her phone and watch her movements, and James kept trying to talk to this ghost, but she would run away from him. I
Mhm.
did a remote viewing on the property. Oh, it's raining really hard here. She actually, was raped by a coworker in the building,
Oh, how horrible.
but she had a lot of good memories in the building, so she stayed there, and what triggered her is somebody that worked there was watching porn on their phone, and it triggered her, and it brought all
Oh.
the memories back up. So she actually took me to where the rape happened and showed me
Mhm.
because she wanted to tell somebody about it. She just wanted to talk about it because it
Mhm.
happened in the '70s, and then it was like, you'd lose your job.
Right.
There was no way that she could tell anybody about it and keep her job. And
Oh,
she was 18 years old, and that was all the money she had in the world was that
poor
store.
thing.
Yeah, but otherwise, she was incredible, but what was phenomenal is she was walking through the store with us, and she started to feel sad again, and she kinda walked away, and my spirit guide said, "Tell James to follow her." So I
Mhm.
did, and she actually shared her emotions with him, and he came out of the corner of the room crying. He
Oh.
had never connected with spirit before, and so that he's intuitive, and I'm finding this, and we can talk about this too. It
Yeah.
seems to me that a lot of people that are investigators are sensitives at the very minimum, and
Mhm.
many of them are psychics, they just didn't realize it or didn't identify with it,
Yeah.
but that's why they're sensing things, and that's why they're feeling things.
Mm.
It's okay that you're sensitive, you're more than that. You're probably a lot more than that, and it's just waking up in you
Yeah.
because 'cause you're acknowledging it and saying, "Oh, I sense that," or "I feel that." But I think it helps with the equipment because it's immediately edifying. Yes, there is something here. I feel funny, and the machine's going nuts. Okay, good. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think too, if it's something that is, I know I found for myself because a lot of the times my experiences have been kind of intermittent, where
Right.
I'll have a weird dream and then suddenly a few days later I'm in wherever I dreamt about and things like that. Or I'll have moments, where I'll get some sort of impression or hear a voice telling me something and it'll turn out to be real. They're so far between that it's hard to trust it as
Yeah.
well. So having that extra bit of an EVP or whatever, EMF or whatever it might be is really validating.
Well, and I think that's what's very exciting too is because that's different. In past generations, there was no connection, there was no
Right.
equipment to prove or disprove anything necessarily. So having sensitivities and getting acknowledgement of that right away in a scientific way, I think blows people away.
It's exciting when you get a validation of whether it's kind of a paranormal spirit thing or working with energy. I remember one time when my mom, after she got diagnosed with dementia, I just sort of became interested in learning anything I could throw at it to make it easier for her or to help her. So
Right.
I studied Reiki and became a
Mhm.
Reiki master and was reading this book about angel Reiki and working with archangels. And that hadn't really tended, and it still really isn't something I work with a ton, but I was trying some of the exercises in the book. And she was sleeping in a recliner, maybe 2, 3 feet away from me, and I didn't want to wake her up. So I was kind of doing more of a distance Reiki thing, even though it was a close
Right, right.
distance. And so I was kind of working through what it said in the exercise I was doing about contacting the Archangel Raphael and working with him to just help ease suffering and
Right.
provide comfort. And I just remember kind of finishing up and drawing my energy back in, and all of a sudden I will never ever forget the chills I felt when this happened. All of a sudden, from a deep sleep, she sat up, and my mom was German, and she yelled out, "Ein Engel!"
What does that
That
mean?
moment where she had actually seen an angel,
Oh, wow.
the same, I wouldn't have believed it before. I would have thought, well, I'm hoping this works, but to have
I
her act,
love I
as I,
love that you linked those, because when we
yeah,
were talking before we started, um, we both do hypnosis,
yeah,
and there was an induction that I learned in my training it was called the angel induction,
mm-hmm,
and where you go through several angels and have an experience with each one, and
mm-hmm,
they kind of work with you briefly.
yeah,
And I was blown away. And Raphael came very boldly through to me, and he did this most amazing thing.
uh-huh.
Um, it's funny that I have blue in my hair now because this is part of the story. So
Oh,
he actually had this giant comb. He was
mm-hmm,
running through all of me,
mm-hmm.
and these little blue strands were coming out.
Like cords or,
Yeah. And so he was just combing my soul, and these
wow.
little strands were coming out of the comb, and he would just toss them. But it was like, it was really calming and soothing,
Mm-hmm,
and I just felt better. And I thought, oh. And so, when we all were done and we were sharing in class, it was like, I said, I don't remember ever connecting with Gabriel or praying about him or anything in
yeah,
my life. And I said, but he was as real to me as everyone in this room. And I said, that was really cool.
mm-hmm,
Wow, who knew? And I mean, the work with angels is everywhere. So
mm-hmm,
whether you like the whole church thing or not, doesn't matter. Angels are everywhere, and they
yeah,
do amazing things in people's lives all the time. But I love that Gabriel connected with you and your mom. That is so
mm-hmm.
cool. I
Yeah,
love
that was
that.
such a cool experience, and it's so
Yeah,
funny you mentioning the hypnosis. Hypnosis is yet another thing I started doing to kind of see if I could help her with it, um,
nice.
after she was sick. But yeah,
Wow.
it's kind of, once you've had one experience and start opening yourself up to the idea of these things, I think you start experiencing more of it. And sometimes it's things you can explain, sometimes not, but it's all just part of what makes it exciting
And
to explore.
yes. Yes, exactly. And I want to do a quick public service announcement. So for people that are concerned, it's 5:55 right now. That I love that repeating numbers. Um,
Too.
for people that are listening and watching, if you're reluctant to get too involved in the supernatural and the paranormal, let me keep it straight for you. Everybody that does paranormal work gets up and goes to the bathroom and puts their pants on one leg at a time. That never changes, that never stops.
Mhm.
You're a normal person in every sense of the word, but you get this added sense, and you get this added experience of life that is encouraging and fun, and it's alive. It's not just on television. It is in front of you. You sense things, you hear things, you feel things, you see things, whatever your connection is, it's another part of life. And
Mhm.
if you go back in history and look, it was there a long time ago. And our ancestors were far more connected to things outside of the everyday realm than what we have been. We have gotten so disconnected
Yes.
from spirit and from nature, and it's been trying. They've been trying for a long time to get our attention and get us to listen again, because we work better together. It works better when you listen to your intuition. When you have a gnawing feeling in your gut about a person, please don't ignore that. That's all
Yeah.
part of it. If you have had an experience like what Martina's describing, something feels weird in your garage, or someplace you went to just has a funny feeling when you're there, don't ignore that. There's
Mm.
nothing wrong with talking about it, and this is the place to do it. You can come on here and we can talk about it, or you can just message me and talk to me about it. Um, it's okay. It's okay to talk about the paranormal, and it's actually quite wonderful and not awful. And
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that anything bad's happening. It could be something very simple going on in your life. But I'm so glad that you're talking about this stuff with me, Martina, because
Me too.
I just enjoy the camaraderie that I have found in the paranormal community. Everyone has been super gracious and kind, and people are really generous with information.
Yes.
It's not secretive. People are very, very prone to being generous with their time and their energy to be open and share
Mhm.
things. So I would love for you to share with everybody what you do in the paranormal these days.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I have a partner, James Ramos, who we run Wandering Spirits of the Pacific Northwest, and we started talking, visioning it probably just about a year ago around this time, and did our own first paranormal podcast episode in, I want to say it aired in early November of last year. So we're coming up on our first anniversary. And one of the things that we really have a big goal of doing, well, I'll say for me personally, a big impetus was losing my mom. Um, for me, when we do investigations and are able to communicate with those who have passed on, it's an affirmation for me that she's out there somewhere.
Right.
So every bit I learn about that and am able to understand makes me feel closer to her as well. But a really big part of our goal is really about telling people stories. I
Mhm.
think so often we approach the paranormal, if you look at TV and all of these ghost hunting shows,
Mhm.
it's so often approached as entertainment, and even kind of, we had talked about this before we started, kind of spooky entertainment that's meant to
Right.
titillate
Right.
and scare you and create endorphins. And we all,
Exactly.
part of us that gets excited by that rush, right? And
Sure,
that,
sure.
there's nothing wrong with that. But if you can brush that part aside and really look deeper, it's, for me, and I think for James as well, it's kind of a spiritual experience. And it's about that thing you were talking about, where if we can connect with spirit and if we can connect with nature through doing that, we actually are connecting more deeply with our own natures and understanding
Right.
ourselves, and
Yes.
not to get too philosophical,
No,
but
no, that's totally fine. I think that our culture has made our lives seem very dry and flat.
mhm,
And we find dimension in television entertainment and games and gaming and all of that's entertainment that's very one-sided. I think
mhm.
that's why a lot of people have gravitated towards interactive game experiences, because it's action and it's
Yeah,
interaction.
excitement.
It's both. It's a connection of both. And I think that we miss that. We don't have that community sense that we once had. In communities, people depended on each other, and
Yeah,
surprise, we still do. I need the guy that delivers the mail. I need the guy
yeah,
that picks up the garbage, and, people need me for things. And so it's all connected. But the spiritual part of it isn't religious.
no,
It's
no,
just energy, and it feels
exactly.
really good. It's
Yeah.
super wonderful. Yes.
And that's a big part of what we're trying to do, is make it not scary. And I'm not saying there aren't energies that are negative that you may
Correct.
or may not encounter when you do these kinds of things.
Oh, yeah.
But by and large, is, I feel like most of what I've encountered has been benevolent or friendly and
Right.
wants to be heard or understood,
Right.
or whatever it might be. So for us, in many ways, it's about kind of, not that you ever can completely, right? But
Right.
it's about
Exactly.
demystifying it and making it less scary. Because I
Yeah.
think we fear the unknown, and death is definitely the big unknown.
Right.
And so for us, it really is about that demystifying and then just learning people's stories. A big part of our podcast, even though it's not necessarily paranormal, is, you know, visiting these different sites and researching what happened there and kind of combining history with the paranormal. We had an amazing experience. We're actually recording about it when you and I are done here.
Oh, yeah.
We went to Walla Walla a couple weeks ago to visit the site of the Whitman mission.
Okay.
And had just kind of an amazing experience researching it and visiting it and
Nice.
feeling all of the energies that are there. And
How fun.
It's just such a tragic story. That it's definitely one of those ones that really has stuck with me. Also, because
Really?
it's recent, but I feel like it's something it's going to be up there with things like we visited Pisgah Colony in St. Helens, and that was another one that just there's so much human emotion.
It's so
there.
interesting, though. I love that story. I'm gonna have to watch it again because there was so much involved with it, and I was kind of blown away. I don't remember ever hearing about it before.
Me neither. And my
I was
family's from here, and I'd never ever heard about it until one of our friends mentioned it. And
wow. And I just thought, what happened there? I mean, there's so much history around us, and I don't think we realize how much has happened in a short amount of time. It's all gone very quickly, and it's great that the details are coming back to the surface again. I
And
think that's one of the most exciting parts, is to find out what happened and who was there and what were their lives like. And no, it's not like history. It's very much like being part of a movie all of a
it comes
sudden.
alive when you combine all of it together. And that's kind of why I was saying visiting the Whitman mission just left, and also I've been researching and reading about it for months as well, but left such a deep impact because there's so much of that story as well that's really been told from kind of a Western colonialist perspective, where it's always been framed as the Whitman massacre, rather than, I really prefer calling it not even the Whitman tragedy, but using the indigenous, the Cayuse, called the area Wailapu, which I'm probably butchering in the pronunciation. But for me, framing it as a tragedy for everyone involved feels so much more resonant, because so often we've left out the experience of the indigenous people in the area, and how no effort whatsoever was made to understand their culture and the pain that brought them. And, you know, how there's so many broken promises, and just the whole missionary culture of the 19th century anyway was very unfair to people who weren't part of.
It was very misguided. It was very misguided.
Very misguided. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So there's a
lot.
subject. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And there's a subject I really want to make sure that we get to. And we talked a little bit about personal experience with dealing with lots of energies around us. And I want to talk about that. So both Martina and I were sharing with each other that there are times when it's hard to be around a lot of people. So at some point in time, everyone has had an experience of one form or another where they felt a little overwhelmed. And maybe it was your first day in kindergarten. Maybe it was your first day on the job, and just being around a bunch of strangers felt a little odd. Yeah. Maybe it felt a little strange. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what happens to you and what you go through and how you handle it?
Oh, sure. So I consider myself to be an introvert. I think I'm pretty good when I have to at adapting to talking to people and being social, just because of the kinds of jobs I've had as an adult. But at heart, I'm an introvert, and I definitely have a very clear threshold of I'm enjoying this. I like being around these people. And even I
Right.
still like these people, but where
Mm.
it's like, okay, I'm done now and I
Yeah.
need to go home or someplace where I am alone and
Right.
recharge, right? I mean, that's what people so often make the mistake of thinking introverts are shy. I mean, we
Yeah.
can be, and I
Right.
definitely have part of me that probably is a little shy as well. But
Right.
it's really more about where do you get your energy. Extroverts tend to feed off of being social, introverts recharge on their own. And that's what the real difference is.
Right.
That in our society is pretty much built towards extroverts. And so being an introvert is kind of weird and we're seen
That's a
as
great
awkward,
observation.
you
I
know?
agree with that 100%. I do have a lot of times where I really enjoy being around my friends or people that I
Mhm.
know, but I found that being around people I don't know can just overwhelm the daylights out of me.
Me too.
And one of the things that Martina shared that I wanna make sure that we mention,
Mhm.
when you find yourself in a situation where you just start to feel angry or sad
Mhm.
and you have no reason to, pay attention to that. You are a sensitive person. That doesn't mean that you're crazy psychic or anything. It just means that you're receptive to what's going on around you. And I'm going to make it as simple as possible to explain this.
Mhm.
It's a survival skill. It means that your ancestors were really good at staying alive.
Yeah.
That's what it means. People that are in the military talk about this, and it's a sixth sense that people have.
Mhm.
Um, People that are in the medical field often have it, policemen often have it. It's a survival skill, and if you have it, you're blessed. You're super blessed. Don't ever think anything otherwise. It just means that you have an innate sensibility in your soul and your mind to be able to sense and pick up on what's going on around you. And animals have that, and they're not
Mhm.
weird. They're just animals, right? So when we sense
Yeah.
things, that needs to be trusted and believed, whatever that is. It's very good to be able to separate yourself from what's coming at you. And if you've had that funny feeling that's not natural to you, you weren't mad 5 minutes ago. Why are you mad now? Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So that means turn off the antenna, you guys. It just means turn it down. It's okay to pick up on stuff, but if it's draining, and negative feelings are always draining. Doesn't mean they're
Mhm.
bad. Doesn't mean we don't need to have them. We definitely need them, but in the right doses and when it's our choice to do that. If you're having a good day, keep your good day and turn those things down. One of the imagery things that I learned that's really helpful, and whether you've seen this or not, just imagine that the parts of your body that are receptive to these energies, you put shutters on and you just close
Mhm.
the shutters. And you're basically just shutting down those things so that you don't have to feel them right now. You don't have to
Yeah.
be drained by that. It's just a protective measure. Bleh,
Mhm.
measure. I can talk. Sorry. Blah, 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 blah. I need more tea. Um, to help you just protect yourself a little bit because you don't want to get wiped out. It might
Yeah.
help you when you're in a crowd sometime. Give it a try. Just pretend that there's shutters. Whatever part of me is picking up on this, I just want to shut that down right now. I don't need that right now, and close it. And that can help you last a little bit longer and not be so wiped out when by the time you get home. So that's my little message for that. But
Yeah.
I'm so glad you talked about that because it's super valid.
Yeah. It is, and I think often, especially like because as I was saying, the world tends to be more geared towards extroverts. Often we think we're being weird or whatever, and really tuning into that when you
Right.
experience those kinds of emotions and stopping and really asking yourself, is this really mine?
Right.
And finding ways where you can draw your energy in to be a little more protective and closer and around you so people or further out to keep things a little further away from you is a really good skill to learn as well.
Right. And I do think it's important to, number one, acknowledge it. Just acknowledge it. If you
Yeah.
catch it happening, good on you. That's perfect.
Yeah.
You need to know it's happening, but control it. Get a
Mhm.
handle on it if you can. And it just takes practice. It's just something you work
Yeah.
on and it takes practice. And It's an incredible skill to have. It's saving your life. It's protecting
Mhm.
you. It's there for a reason, and it's not weird, it's cool. It's really
Yeah.
cool. I love it. I think it's a fantastic skill to have. But I do understand exactly what Martina was describing to me earlier, and yeah, there's times when you get out in public and it's like, "Oh, no, I'm done. I'm so done." And all I
Mhm.
can think about is, "I wanna go home. I just wanna be in my house because that's my safe spot. That's my sanctuary.
Yeah.
That's where I control the energy and nothing icky can bother me," and it's like and I just don't get wiped out because even the
Mhm.
nicest people on the planet, some of the most lovely people on the planet, can suck the life out of you just because of the
Mhm.
moment they're in, just because of
Yeah.
what they're experiencing, and we gotta protect ourselves a little bit, be kind and understanding and listen, but stop when you need to stop. Go home
Yeah.
if you need to go home. It's okay.
Yeah,
You
it
know?
really is a type of self-care to
Yeah.
know what's yours and what's not, and when you need to remove yourself, or when your battery is running low and when you need to recharge, for
Yeah, and
sure.
I think socially, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to always just be in the moment and just have fun. Don't worry about it or just do this. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and then you can stop too. It's okay to stop. It's
Yeah.
okay to say, "Thank you. I've had a wonderful time and it's time for me to go now. I need to go." It's okay to do that. Speaking
Yes.
as an older person, do that more, you guys. Don't just be nice for someone else. If you constantly give away yourself, you have nothing to give yourself. Take
Mhm.
care of yourself first so you have more to give if you want.
Yeah.
Definitely. So let's talk about what is it like for you to go on an investigation? What's your favorite thing about that?
I think really my favorite, well, for one, I mean, I think I've already kind of touched on this. I know we talked about it before we started, but none of this is something that's scary to me. I've I've definitely been places where I have a bit of a sense of I don't want to mess around and find out,
Right.
and
Okay. Sure.
feel that any place you go needs to be treated with respect, and that, you know, any kind of spirit we talk to, they're not show ponies. It's not a circus. They're not there to perform for you.
Right.
So for me, part of it is just the real, like, having interaction and talking. A lot of the times when we go places, I'll just go plop myself down on the ground somewhere and meditate for a minute and try to center. And then I'll just ask questions and talk. And sometimes I get a bit of an impression of an answer. Sometimes I get nothing, but I have a voice recorder on. So afterwards, James usually does the reviewing of our sound stuff.
Mhm.
I'm always eager to hear back what he found, because often I get answers that maybe I
Right.
didn't hear, or answers that validate whatever
Nice.
I asked. It's interesting. He always says that spirits like to talk to me, that he finds more responses sometimes on my recorder than on his.
Yeah.
Um, I have absolutely no idea why that is, but it's fascinating, and it's so interesting when you get those. I think one of the misconceptions people have about doing paranormal work too is that you're sitting there, because we're used to seeing things that are edited for TV, where you have an
Sure.
hour of one exciting interaction after another, when the
Right.
reality is often you sit there for an hour with nothing, but then
Right.
get some little tiny window into the other side. But that moment where you get the little window is the exciting part.
Yes, absolutely, and that's what keeps us going back, and
Yeah.
we've noticed too that sometimes when people are just chatting, the ghosts interject. They wanna
Yes.
be a part of the conversation. Have you found that as
We
well?
we have had that too. We had a really interesting experience. My great great grandparents are buried in Newburgh, in the Grand Army of the Republic
Oh, wow.
cemetery there. And James and I went to visit, and we were having a conversation where it seemed like my great great grandfather was interjecting.
Really?
Yes, and we had my dog, my German Shepherd Luna. She's 9 months old, and especially when she was really young and too young to be left for more than a really short period, we
Right.
would just take her along when we would go places.
Right.
And James and I were talking, and I made some joke about, because they were farmers, and I was saying they may have had a very different view towards animals
Right.
than I do. And, Luna is, any animal I have ends up super spoiled because I love
Right.
them.
Of course. Right.
And when I made that comment, James and I were talking back and forth. And later, when we were reviewing the recording, you hear a laugh,
Oh, yeah. That's
which was
funny.
pretty awesome. And also
That is.
just the suspicion that it was an actual relative of mine.
Oh, sure.
Was
Oh,
pretty
sure.
exciting.
That's funny. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. I wonder sometimes what they think of all of the changes when they come back to visit and peek, and what do they notice, and what's really, you know, really forefront in their mind. Because some of the spirits that I've interacted are just shocked. They're so shocked. I
Hmm.
have this one cemetery that my husband and I go to, and there's a family with several generations of people that have passed on, and the younger members are very excited to see my phone.
Hmm.
And there's this one older gentleman, a grandfather, that just can't stand it. It freaks him out. The phone is just too much. The technology is so strange and foreign, and it
Hmm.
just, and I think part of it's generational too, because if something was foreign, it was evil.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Magic was bad. Anything that was unexplainable or unfamiliar must be bad. Just
Right.
because it's different, it must be bad.
Yeah.
And so I love that there's such a degree of responses that's so unique for each of them. It's just really fun. I love it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting just thinking about when we were at the Whitman mission. I often think about how it must be so weird for individuals who lived, in the 1800s to see the way women dress and talk and behave. When we were at the Whitman mission, I definitely had this sort of feeling of a woman there who was kind of disapproving of me. And James and I had been kind of talking about the history around the area, and I expressed some dislike of attitudes in the 19th century toward people of other races and
Right.
native folk and all of that. And I really kind of clearly heard, why don't you just go away? Just go. It really felt like it was this kind of same energy that I felt around me, that was a little not dangerous or anything like that, but just kind of disapproving.
Right.
Which,
Dismissive. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and a woman who came from a certain level of society and background, in the
Right.
19th century, definitely, I'm sure, would have a lot of ideas about, like I said, how we dress, or people disagreeing about
Right.
the
Yeah.
worthiness of people who aren't white colonists.
Oh, yeah. I actually have
All of
a
that.
grandfather that did seances back in the 20s and 30s in Chicago,
Really?
and he, shows up when I do seances periodically, and he's very strict with me about what I wear.
Uh-huh.
So, I do seances usually on Sunday nights with my husband, and once in a while, we have people over to do things with us, but it's Sunday night, y'all, and I'm casual. I do not dress up. I do not do
Yeah.
anything fancy schmancy. And my grandfather, my great grandfather, was an attorney and a very well dressed man all the time. And when he
Mhm.
did his seances, it was in public, at a public location. He dressed in suits always,
Oh,
Thursday evenings, and his his entire countenance is a very professional adult male.
mhm.
So, when I've got my tank top on and my yoga pants, he's looking at me going, "Mm-mm, go put a shirt on." So,
Yeah.
he gets in my business, and it's like, "Don't wear that. What are you doing?" And it's I know it's him because I know what his dismissive behavior and the scolding, and it's like, oh my gosh, why do you care?
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna see me. It's okay, and it's like, no, it's not okay. Go put a shirt on. It's like, okay, the
Yeah.
ghosts really don't mind, oh, it's just funny. I have such a funny time. I adore him. He's a
Aw.
character. He's just a character, and he passed long before I got to meet him, and, I think he's a lot more fun in the afterlife than he probably was alive because he was very serious when he was alive,
Yeah.
but, in his ghost life, he's definitely fun, and I do get a kick out of his comments, even if I disagree with them, it's very interesting that the perception, you're having people over. Yes, they're
Mhm.
ghosts, and they really don't care what I'm wearing. They're okay. They're here for other reasons. They're not here to look at my shirt. It's like they wanna just let me listen to them and so they can share their stories. It's just funny. He's
Yeah.
he just tickles me. He's just a character. But
That's
all
great.
of the ghosts are for me. I never tire of hearing ghost stories, and I don't think I ever will. I enjoy hearing anything that they have to say,
Aw.
whether it's how they died or just something they want someone to know.
Mhm.
Um, the stories are vast. I have hundreds and hundreds of stories. I've thought about at some point I might release the seances. I have started recording them. I started recording them about 5 or 6 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And just like an investigation, there's periods of time of silence
Yeah.
because sometimes there's nothing happening. It's just quiet, and I'm just waiting for
Mhm.
spirit to do whatever they're doing. And,
Oh,
so I gotta
interesting.
edit them because I don't think anyone wants to sit and listen to me sit and listen. That's not fun. So it's gotta be something a little more engaging, I think. But yeah, I
Great.
mean, all of it to me is an exciting experience. Oh, I want you to please share and talk about the picnic. How did that start? Because I am
Oh,
absolutely outside of my head. I'm so excited about this. I cannot wait.
we're super excited about it too. I don't even remember who came up with it anymore, but we just kind of, I think it was around the time of the Oregon Ghost Conference that we
Mhm.
started talking about it, just thinking about how nice it was to get together with other people who have the same kind of interest and don't write it off as something kooky, and just really wanting to create something with what we're doing as well that is a real community and not just, a random Facebook group where people come in just to advertise whatever it is that they're doing, but really a
Right.
place where people get together and talk about things and exchange ideas. And so we got this idea that wouldn't it be fun just to get together in a really casual environment and have something that's kind of like a family picnic where James and I'll, buy some chicken or whatever, and everybody else brings their favorite side dish and just have this big potluck somewhere pretty and hang out together. So that's kind of how it started. And then we just got really excited. I think we started advertising it way too early because we were excited, but it's actually getting closer now. It's just about a month away. And we're having it at Willamette Mission. And yeah, just really looking forward to getting together with
I'm
people. And
super excited. Well, first of all, like I told James when we were talking, I love anything that's picnic related,
me
barbecue,
too.
and that's one of my favorite things in the world is cooking and sharing with people and
Mhm.
eating, of course.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're right. I feel like the whole getting together for the Oregon Ghost Conference is a drop in the bucket. This
Mhm.
is such a different subject matter. It's not something everybody gets to live and breathe 24/7. So when we get to share and we get to talk, that's really fun. And that's really neat to be able to be around people who are like-minded. Because as my very dear neighbor tells me, if I would have shared these stories with people when they happened, they would have put me in the funny house. It's so cool that in this day and age, we can talk about the paranormal and not get put into an insane asylum for
Mhm.
saying something. We can
Yeah.
talk now. It's okay. It's out
Yeah.
in the open.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
just love this idea of community. I don't think it's really something we've advertised much with it, but it worked out so nicely that it ends up being the weekend of the autumn equinox, which,
Is
if you
it?
follow an
Nice.
earth-based path, is kind of the second harvest festival
Nice.
after autumn starts. And all of these harvest festivals are all about community and
Right.
sharing. And there's so much bonding, I think, that happens in
Right.
sharing food, right?
Yes.
That's why churches and other, other communities have potlucks and those kinds
Right.
of things, because it's all these people coming together in this shared energy in a space
Yeah.
where everybody's welcome and their stories are welcome. And
Right.
that's really exciting to us to get to hopefully create something that we're going to do every year. And
That would be
we
great.
kind of keep talking each other down because we want to make it bigger and bigger. And what if we did this? And what if we added that? And just to, especially this first time, just
Keep it
make it a
simple.
family picnic.
Yeah. And honestly, yes, because it's going to be a lot more work than you realize once you get your feet
Mhm.
in there, but also because um it's the whole purpose is just to let people talk and keep it really simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just being there is going to be the important part.
I think
Yeah.
so. And just building community, getting to know each other, being able to kind of network with other people and, you know, trade ideas, say, hey, you want to come on my podcast? So I
Right.
really enjoyed
Or
this
just share
conversation.
stories. It's fun to share
Yeah.
stories. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
are we gonna wear name tags that we're gonna say our name and what group we're in?
I think we'll probably get some paper name tags. Yeah, for sure.
That
And
could be
it's,
fun. I just thought of
yeah,
that. So we
yeah,
don't,
that's a good
because I know a
idea.
lot of people know each other, but not everybody does. It'd be nice to introduce
Yeah.
yourself a little bit.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people I know for us too that we know from Facebook and online and but where we've never really met them in person
Right.
as
Exactly.
well. So that added thing of having name tags probably is a really good idea. So people have that little extra thing to
That
make it
would be
just a
fun.
little less awkward to meet each other.
Well, I can't wait because my husband's mom had 2 recipes. She didn't like cooking, but for
uh,
someone who didn't like cooking, she was amazing at cooking. And so she had these baked beans, and so it's not chili
hmm
exactly,
hmm
'cause it's sweeter than chili a little,
Okay.
but it's so dang good, and
Yum.
everybody loves it, and so he makes this massive crock pot of it, and her macaroni salad, and I don't know why, it's super simple, it's not exciting, but oh my gosh, it's good. It's really, really good, so I'm excited.
I have
So
a friend like that too. She makes the most amazing macaroni salad, and I've asked
yeah,
her a million times, what do you
right.
put in this that makes it so good?" And I've tried to replicate it myself, and it is never ever as good as what she makes. I don't know
Isn't that funny?
what she does, but hers is just amazing. So I just make her bring hers whenever.
I think that's probably the wisest thing. I get to that point too. It's like if I can't replicate it, then I'm not gonna mess with it. You just
Yeah,
please make it for me. I don't wanna screw it up.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
that is so much fun. I can't wait. So
yeah.
for
So
anyone that's
looking forward.
interested in the picnic, at the bottom of the screen is the .com, but if you wouldn't mind, read that for the people that are just listening. So if people wanna contact you, they can.
Yeah, so it's wanderingspiritspnw.com. And you can find our website there, obviously, and our podcast. And there will soon be a little blurb about the picnic. And you can definitely follow us on Facebook at Wandering Spirits of the PNW. Again, and we've been posting there a lot about the picnic coming up and sharing links on how to register. And we're only asking people to register just because we're buying chickens, so we need to know how many people are coming. So James and I aren't sitting there by ourselves eating 10
Right.
pounds of chicken alone,
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
which we won't
exactly.
be, but it
No,
helps.
you're gonna be surrounded, I guarantee you. There's gonna be gobs of people there, I'm sure. I'm sure. Well,
I'm really
Martina,
looking forward.
thank you so much for coming
Yeah.
on today. I just think this has been a blast, and I can't wait to see you at the picnic. It will be so much fun. We're gonna have a blast, I'm
Yeah, I
sure.
can't wait to meet you in person.
I
And we definitely
know.
would love to have you come on our podcast as well
Absolutely.
sometime.
We can do
Great.
that. We can totally
Great.
do that. So for everyone listening and viewing, thank you so much. Please like and share, as my friend Jay likes to remind me. I know it
Yes.
doesn't cost anything. It takes just a few seconds, but it really helps my page. It helps me get out to other people that are interested in this. So this is Holly saying goodbye from Holly's Pandorium. And thank you, Martina, from coming in from the Wandering Spirits Pacific Northwest. It's been great to have you here, and everyone have a wonderful evening or afternoon, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Thanks for coming.